So this is a study of an application software that uses AI and generation using a mobile platform. And the generation is based on ChatGPT's OpenAI API platform. And the app is focused on word roots and etymology, which is using word roots to learn about English vocabulary. And it relies mostly on the AI and large language models of OpenAI's API platform to generate content without a need for humans to do so. So um, this is the overview of what this study discusses and what we'll be discussing today. So the introduction will be based on the goals and methodologies of this app and why it was created. Then we will address design challenges and potential bugs that were present or relevant in the app creation process. Then I will address the solution, which is overall the design of the app and how that takes into account some of the challenges and some of the original goals of using the AI model. Um, then we did an experiment with user satisfaction, so I'll talk about how that reflects upon the app. And then related work and conclusion, we'll briefly sum up what relevant fields this app approaches and addresses, as well as how that adds to the existing technology within these fields. So first of all, with the introduction, the goals of this app is to utilize artificial intelligence to expedite the content generation process. Um, with regards specifically to pedagogical material. So I think teaching, a lot of teachers nowadays rely on themselves to create uh, content for students, whether that be handouts or slides. So this app tries to address that because we recognize that there's not a lot of resources in terms of mass creation and reaching a wide audience. If we want to um, do so, we can't use humans to create content. And so it explores using a large language model, especially with a field like etymology, where there's a lot of patterns and where AI can be most effective and accurate. And we chose this to explore the potentials and the limitations of AI in generating content. And so this app actually supplements the curriculum for an existent nonprofit organization that hosts weekly meetings and classes to teach vocabulary words. The app was designed as a practice of sorts, available to students who are using the organization's curriculum. Um, so the applicable fields taught using in the curriculum are etymology, mnemonics, and application of vocabulary in various fields. Um, but the app mainly targets etymology, and we also have included some grammatical content as a sort of experimentation with how this app can be implemented and integrated into other fields of learning as well. The ideal outcomes or the goals of this app is to expand the reach of the nonprofit organization to provide vocabulary education for more targeted students. Currently, we are hoping to use this app to, first of all, advertise the service to more students and also to provide online service without any human resources needed for those who are unable to attend class or who are not interested in our original curriculum offerings. Um, we also would like to offer an engaging new alternative to traditional and conventional vocabulary learning and stimulate excitement for learning language in the process. So those were the goals of the app. And the AI automation was meant to support these outcomes. Um, so some of the highlights of methods that we included, and this is for methods of the app, not necessarily methods of the experimentation. Um, the app strays from existing technological implementation to explore new ways of integrating artificial intelligence. So we apply that to personalize the English learning process. Each user has a completely unique lesson page and quiz page. And I'll talk about that more as I discuss the details of each page. But the idea is that every person's page is personalized and generated based on their past progress as well as their personal information. Um, the also other advantages of this method include predictive modeling and spaced repetition. So because the AI that the API that we used is created to highlight patterns in learning and in the data produced by the students' scores, results, etc. We're able to use predictive modeling to sometimes recycle questions that the student answers incorrectly, or to repeat after a certain period of time, for example, to enhance retention. Some of that is still in the process of being implemented, but this is another advantage of using artificial intelligence in content creation for pedagogical purposes. So the final advantage that I like to highlight is that while AI can personalize the content drastically, it still allows every piece of content created to stay within the predetermined constraints, given, of course, that the API functions as is supposed to, which is out of our control, but instead within the control of OpenAI's platform. So as long as that remains consistent, then the response that is generated through the platform is supposed to be structured and systemic because of the strict prompts that we've set upon what could be generated as content for students. So now we'll address some of the challenges that occur during the creation process. So some of the challenges that we identified were inadequate response, which I was just referring to, in that the API sometimes returns either answers or content that are misaligned with the intended JSON format. The app, you can see in the code that will later be shown, is very dependent on the JSON format. As that is how we transfer data um, generated to a user-friendly mode. And so sometimes if it does not match the JSON format that we provided, that transfer isn't able to happen. And so on the user's end, you see a result of an error from the terminal. Obviously, that is not supposed to happen. So we had to, first of all, try to eliminate those occurrences, but also prepare for when and if that happens, how to show the user a more friendly version. And so that was obviously the error screen, where we have a pop-up that says error, content could not be generated. So the app doesn't crash. It just allows the user to regenerate if they would like to. Another challenge is user design. So the automatic redirections within the app sometimes need to be considered within the actual user, uh, how the user, within the scopes of how the user will interact with the app. And so one example is that after the content is generated and transferred to a lesson page, the program it will not bring itself back to the lesson page. And so when we first were building the app, we realized that we needed to add an extra redirection so that the page reroutes from the generated page back to the lessons page and takes the user into that lesson. And I'll show some pictures later. Finally, the database structure also needed to be very closely aligned with the user input structure, similarly to how the response from the API platform must also be aligned. So it's a three-step process, one being the API return, another being the user end, and then the database. And so it goes through all data and content generated goes through that flow. So they must all be aligned in the same format that allows for data and content transfer. So there were a few instances when the database was misaligned where we did not ask for the user to input extra information into the profile section. And so the app could not run because one of the prerequisites for content generation was that the input in the profile page, about the user background page, must not be empty. And so when it was empty because we did not make space for the user to input that information, the database was also misaligned because it was empty. And so the app did not run properly. And so that was another challenge that we had to take into account. So some of the solutions, or I guess features of our app, I'll be talking about three today. One being the login sign up page, another being the home page, and then the lessons quizzes page. So the login page is pretty straightforward. It's similar to other apps. takes on the existing structure of login pages across the board in all types of apps and software. So login, if user credentials match, users will be taken to their personal page. And this is very important because, as I mentioned before, every page is very personalized based on the user's past interactions with the app. And they can access their past progress whenever they log in, as is expected. For new users, they may create an account from the login page by entering account credentials and additional information. And as I mentioned, the additional information is required. So users will not be able to create an account without that, as their lesson generation is dependent on the information that they enter. And in the profile page, I'll discuss what types of information is entered and how that affects the content generation. So this is a screenshot of the login page. It's a very generic login page, but we do try to vary and check for the credentials to make sure that the user enters the correct page. Some of the code behind the login page, this would be pretty generic for any sort of login page. Now, the home page is another more simple page in terms of content. It includes recommended lessons. So if users have created lessons that they have not yet used or entered into, these will show up on the homepage as recommended for the user to work on. So on the lesson page, a list of all, this is the lesson page. A list of all lessons will be displayed alongside the completion status. And users can access past lessons at any time as long as they have been generated already. And this is one of the unique features of the app, but we have a generate new lesson button at the bottom right corner that allows users to generate a new a new lesson. And that lesson will be completely customized based on the user's past progress. And then the lesson detail page is the actual page of the lesson, not the comprehensive list of all lessons. It shows details of the lesson. As of right now, we're still working on making the lessons themselves more I guess, better in terms of content. But that is a different aspect of the app, more of the pedagogical, educational aspect of the app, and does not have to do as much with the technical details. So the lesson page as of right now includes examples as well as an explanation. And all content is generated with OpenAI's API. We did feed the model some past lesson examples that were created by humans for it to model these lessons after. So this is the lesson page, and it displays on the left, this is the list of lessons. After your lesson is generated, it shows the day on which it was generated, and if users would like to generate a new lesson, they simply click on the generate lessons, and that will generate 5 more lessons or 3 more lessons depending on the user setting. And all past lessons will show up on this page. On this specific account that this screenshot was taken from, the user happened to only have generated 3, but if the user keeps on generating lessons, they will all show up on this page. On the right is a sample of the actual lesson page that shows the details of the lesson. So as of right now, we have what the lesson is about, we have an example, explanation, and the rule. The language is another thing that we are trying to refine. Obviously, this is very reminiscent of AI generated content speech style. But the importance of this app is the actual transfer of the content and impartation of the information, the grammatical rules, the etymological rules. And so we are refining the specific style or of the language as a side note, but it is not the main focus of the technical aspects. So this is the code that goes into the lesson page. Something I would like to point out here is that we have a update current lesson, and that goes back to a separate method that was written that informs upon how the current lessons are updated. And so when lessons are generated using a prompt and also OpenAI's so using OpenAI's API feature, we get the content from the API, and then we transfer that using the JSON into the database, and that is where it shows up on the user's page. This is the quiz page. It shows a list of all quizzes displayed and the completion status. The format will be very similar, parallel to the lesson page, and users can access all past quizzes as they do with lessons. One particular aspect that I want to point out is that the quiz page is automatically generated alongside each lesson. And so users do not have to manually click a generate quiz page after each lesson is generated. A quiz will automatically be generated within the quizzes page that's accessible within the quizzes page alongside that lesson. And this is another aspect of how the app is very controlled. There is a specific format for everything, including quizzes and lessons. And so this represents some of the structure that we have within the app. In the quiz detail page, it is the same format as the lesson detail page, but instead of showing content, it asks questions, and these are also generated automatically using artificial intelligence. We include sentences or questions and also selections, so most of the quizzes are multiple choice. The grading is also automatic, as the content is generated automatically and the correct answer is generated automatically. Given that it is correct, the API sometimes does make mistakes because AI is not very stable as of right now. But most of the time, it is correct, and so the grading is also done correctly and automatically. So this is an example of the quiz page and some of the code behind it. Most of this is just the actual user design of the page, but there are methods that check for the information, the correct answer, which is stored within the database, and checks whether the user entered the same or clicked the same button as is related to the correct answer, and that is how the grading is completed. This is Yep. So then finally, the profile page includes the user information and the list of lessons completed. So the user information includes the name, age, and background, and these are what we use in terms of lesson generation. So since we already have a curriculum with the Wordology organization, the app or the API assigns content to each user based on how old they are and their previous levels of experience. And that is why we require the age and background experience. As the user uses the app more extensively, there's also a continuous list of lessons completed that is generated and populated. And based on those past scores and the content within those past lessons, new lessons will also adapt. So it's a very adaptable experience. And then finally, users can manually update the information. They cannot change the list of lessons completed, but they can update name, age, background, sign up, login information, and credentials by clicking into each field and updating that field. So here are some pictures of the profile page. The name, age, and background can be edited by the user, and then the list of lessons completed will also be used when new content is being generated, taking into account also the experience and background of the user. So here's an experiment that was done to assess the user experience and satisfaction. We collected data using surveying. So participants interacted with the app and rated their interaction using a numerical scale. Specifically, they gave a score of 1 to 10 based on usability, content relevance, and effectiveness. And we controlled for different environments. So a noisy environment and a relatively quiet and private environment. See if the user's satisfaction with the app varied drastically based on the environment under which it was used. And here's the data from that experiment. The mean was pretty much similar in terms of quiet and noisy, and the median also did not vary by much. So we conclude that the app is overall helpful, and users found it to be satisfactory, regardless of the environment used. The highest value and lowest value, not the median, varied a little bit, but overall the app users, as can be demonstrated from the mean and median, expressed high satisfaction with the app um, under both conditions. And so we concluded that this app can be helpful if applied in a greater extent for relevant fields. And so that is what I will conclude based on. So relevant fields and features of this app include the AI auto generation. Advantages include adapting to students' learning, as I have discussed before. There's not a lot of other sources that don't have a predetermined curriculum, but we use the adaptability of generative AI to adapt to students' personal learning progress. And so each user's experience will be drastically different based on how they interact with the app. Some disadvantages include data privacy issues because we do operate a very large database, especially since we have more downloads occurring every day. And so at some point, the capacity of our database needs to be addressed. In addition, because the generation is taking place real time, users need to be connected to the internet to use the app. And so that's something that might also limit how our users can use the app and who can use the app based on their geographical location and their dependency and their accessibility to the internet. Um, Another feature that's relevant is the repetition model and learning. And so some advantages include optimum retention. As I've discussed, artificial intelligence is very optimally designed for picking up on patterns in learning. And so the repetition that takes place within the curriculum in the app can be helpful for retention. But some disadvantages include the overly structured sometimes system and how it might not address varied learning styles and cultural differences in learning based on the wide variety of users that we have. So that is all that I'm discussing today. Thank you. Are there any questions?